Welcome to this lecture. Here we are going to learn about different ways to create form in Django. The very first one is returning HTML markup as HTTP response. So what we do is we construct the HTML string within the view in order to return the HTML form. The next one is HTML forms with Django templates. So you can create HTML forms directly in your Django template using HTML form tags and input fields. Further, we have a feature called as Django forms. So Django has its own form handling system where you can use the Django.forms module in order to construct your form. Finally, we have model forms. So if you want to create a form based on a model, then you can use Django's model form. So let's have a look how we can create our form using our very first method. Let's see that how we can create this kind of form using the HTML markup within the HTTP response. Let's create one function with the name simple form. You must note that we are not going to create any template for this. Right, so we just have to return an HTTP response, and within this we'll be returning our whole form. So we have to return a string here. So for saving time, I'm just pasting the HTML code here. So right now you can see that it's showing some kind of problem in this file. As you can see that this bracket has now become red, and if you see that, you can also check inside the terminal. It says unterminated string literal at line number 133. It means that we are not writing the proper syntax. The reason for this is that we are using a multi-line string here, and in Python, if you know, we have to use the f string in order to return multi-line string. So we'll be using f string for this, and we have to use triple inverted quotes. Right, so it seems fine for now. You can see that there is no error. And now let's get back to the urls.py and write down the required path. Simple form. The function that we want to call is views.simpleForm. Let's check for the errors. Okay, so no errors. Let's check the result on the browser. We have to write simple form. So as you can see, it is able to render this form. But when you are clicking on the submit button, it will show you some forbidden CSRF verification failed, request abort. So now we have to talk about this as well. Now let's have a look what is CSRF. CSRF stands for cross-site request forgery, which is a type of security vulnerability. Hence, it needs protection. Now, let's try to understand that how a CSRF attack can be done. So what happens here, that an attacker can trick a user into performing actions on any web application when they are authenticated, and that too without their consent. So let's try to understand this with the help of a diagram. Let's say this is the attacker, the perpetrator. This attacker will forge a request for a fund transfer to a website. Now in this step number 2, what the attacker will do, he will embed the request into a hyperlink and will send to the actual or original visitor who is already logged into that site. So this visitor, this user is already logged in and the session is already created. Now this user might think that this email is from the bank. Okay, now after this, the user will click on the link and will send the request to the website. But actually what happens, the website will validate the request and will transfer the funds from the visitor's account to the attacker. So that's the reason that CSRF protection is required, because it is important for the server to know that It is the user who is trying to submit the form and not someone else, or it's not the attacker. It's actually the user who is doing it. Now let's see how the server can protect the user from being attacked. Consider that this is your actual client and this is the server. So the server will generate a unique CSRF token whenever the user is requesting any form page. So this token is stored in the user's session on the server. The server will further include the CSRF token inside the form. So whenever the form is submitted, the client will send the CSRF token back to the server. Hence, that time the server will validate the submitted token against the one that is already stored. So if they match, the request is processed. If it's not matched, then it will be rejected. So in order to resolve that error, we need the CSRF token. That can be done using from Django dot middleware dot CSRF import get token. You have to import the get underscore token class. And now you are ready to create a variable. Let's say any variable you can create. I'm using CSRF underscore token equals to get underscore token. So we have to use the same class get underscore token as a function, and you have to pass the parameter as a request. Okay, now what next? You also have to pass a hidden field right after you are using this form tag. So you have to pass a hidden field by using, I'll be using input type equals to hidden, input type equals to hidden, and you have to write the name as CSRF middleware token. Just check the spelling once, CSRF middleware token. Okay, and what is the value that you're going to pass? The value that you will be passing here is, within the curly braces, this variable that you just created. So pass this value, pass this variable here, and you must close your tag. Now once you are done with the changes, get back to the browser and check the results. So you must again render this form and click on the submit button. You see that the error CSRF is not being shown anymore. The reason is now we have used the CSRF token. For better understanding, you can once change this post method to the get method, and once again check the results on the browser. Just refresh. Now click on the submit button. Now you will be able to see that hidden field, because we are using the get request at this point, and we know very well whenever we are using the get method, we will be able to see the query string right in the URL. So you see that inside the middleware, CSRF middleware token, we are getting some value. So it is not advisable to use the get method this time, because we are using the CSRF token, which should not be shown to anyone. But this is only for the purpose of understanding that we now used the get method. Otherwise, we'll be using the post method always. Okay, let's once again, we can refresh once, or we can once again render this form by using localhost 8000, and we have to use simple form, right? So this is our form. Now you click on submit. So you see that whenever we are clicking on the submit button, the CSRF middle token, the value is changing every time. The reason this is creating different values because we are not having any active session. So that's the reason whenever we are reloading our page, every time it will show us a different value. Now let's try to modify our example. Now what we want is that whenever we are writing anything into this text box, let's say I write some name, let's say I'm writing Mickey Mouse. So whatsoever the name is being entered, I should be able to submit, and the name, the first name or the last name or whatever I'm entering into these text boxes should be visible on the web page, should be rendered on the web page. So means that first of all the values from these text boxes should be fetched and then it should be printed on the browser. Now let's make a few changes in this. After this, after we are using the CSRF token here, after this variable, we have to use a condition that if request dot method is a post method. So if it's a post method, then we have to fetch the values from the two text boxes. Let's say the first variable is text box 1, which is holding this variable request dot, this time I'll be using post method, and let's change this one to post method. So I'll be using request dot post dot get function, within which I'm going to use the name of the text box, that is this one, first text box. So first text box is actually text box 1. So let's write down text box 1 here. So this text box 1 variable will fetch the value from the text box 1 text box. Now let's take another one, text box 2, request dot post dot get function, within which we'll be fetching the value from text box 2. Right. Now what we want that whenever we are clicking on the submit button, we should be able to show or render the values on the web page. So let's render that. You have to write down return the HTTP response, and you will be using f-string. You have to use f-string. The values are, we have to use text box 1 and text box 2. Text box 1 and text box 2. Now what after this? So we also have to render this form. Now how it is possible that you're using two HTTP responses? It means that you have to use the else condition as well. So you have to write, once your if statement is ready, that whenever the request.method is a post method, then this should work, or else it should at least render your form. So we'll be just rectifying our indentation this time. Right, so our indentation is now almost correct. Okay, let's check for the errors. No more errors. And right, let's check on the browser. So I'm now going to once again render this. Let's click on the submit button. The values are okay, nice. So let's see if I write here Mickey Mouse and click on submit. Great. So the values are Mickey and Mouse. In the upcoming lecture, we will learn that how we can create HTML forms with the help of Django templates. For now, that's all for this lecture.